Wow, that was an incredible documentary. Thank you for making it and being here. It's a real honor and a great pleasure to have you, Madonna Thunder Hawk, and Marcella Gilbert as our guest in the Nature Narrative program series. So my first question to you, so how did it feel making this movie together as mother and daughter, and what did it do to you when you saw the movie for the first time? You got a mic right beside you. Yeah.
When I first saw it, I cried. I mainly because there's so much archival footage, and I grew up, I grew up with all this. So, seeing people who aren't here anymore, or seeing my brothers and sisters from the survival school, and then the history of, like my mom when she's welcoming people at the survival gathering, that's my favorite part of the film. She's like a rock star to me. It's like, yes. But yeah, it's been good because of the history, and then I get to travel with her and spend time. We get to spend time together now too, so it's been good.
Excellent.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. For me, it was a long haul, because it went through so many changes, and then I was busy at home. I work with a group of grandmothers, and we keep the tribal council honest, those kinds of things at home. So we're busy, but yeah, I just so when it was done, it was like, oh man, it's done finally, So I had seen so many different versions and different takes that they took. It looked good, and we'd say, "Oh yeah, that's good, that's good." The next time we'd see it, it would be a little bit different, So say, "Well, what happened?" There was this one scene that we liked, but they took it out or whatever. So pretty soon, to me, it just kind of got to like, well, whatever, whenever, But when I did get to see it, I thought, the archive footage, that was the main thing, It was just like, wow, all of those things happened, they did happen. So yeah, I'm glad we got it done, and it was in a good way. It didn't start out with mother and daughter. It started out what we wanted, a voice for women of the Red Power movement. Women, but the money, the people with the money, they call the shots a lot of times, or they try to. So it had to be narrowed down. Her and I had to. She didn't even want to be in it. She said, "What? Not me. I'm not. No, we're not doing that." She wasn't going to go there, And then me, I was saying, no, that isn't what we wanted to start out with. This is not going to be the Madonna show. Well, it ended up we had to compromise, but it's okay. It's good.
Madonna Thunder Hawk. In the opening scene at We Will Remember Survival School, you say to the children, in reference to George Washington, the first person that says that he is the father of our country, I'm gonna punch him out. This is such a powerful opening. So why did you start the We Will Remember Survival School?
It was basically my son, because we were in Wounded Knee 73 in the occupation. I had my 10-year-old son with me. There's a lot of stories or renditions of how that all came about, but we had a mile-long caravan of cars going through Wounded Knee, heading north of the reservation. We were on our way somewhere else, and the powers that be opened up on us. We heard gunfire as we were coming through Wounded Knee. Now, Wounded Knee is a small village that's down. It's hills all around. So it's down like that. So when we started the long trek down in there, that's when they opened up started shooting at us. So I would never take a child, into any kind of gunfire, and my only son. But we were on our way somewhere else to meet with another community. And in those days, nobody had a forum. There was nobody to tell their problems to. But the American Indian movement came along, and that's what we ended up doing. We got invited to go everywhere. So that's why we were traveling a lot, and we learned how to move around in caravans, a caravan of cars, mini cars. So he's the one that, after Wounded Knee, I stayed in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is the urban area in the Black Hills, but it's close to the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I was working with the legal committee, was formed to help all the people. There was 380 some people that got criminal charges. I mean, that's what the government does, for any kind of protest or any kind of resistance, you're automatically criminalized. So that's what America does. But so yeah, everybody was indicted and had charges. So I didn't want my children in any kind of school system where there would be fights and bullying and you name it. So my son said, well, why don't we have our own school? So, I was a young mother back in the day, and I thought, well, yeah. Why don't we have our own school? Look, if you're going to resist, you might as well go the whole way, and especially your children. And I didn't know anything about education. I never promoted education. We were forced into a system where we had to learn the English language. We had to learn world history. I probably learned about the Netherlands before I did about what happened to my people. So that's the kind of education we had. So I wasn't promoting education, but I got to realize how important knowledge was. So when my son said that, boom, we had a school.
Oh, great story, and very, very important. Marcella Gilbert, in the documentary, you talk about rebuilding relationships with the land and getting back to traditional food. You also mentioned that everywhere colonizers go, they change the food diet. It started with a massacre of nearly 40 million buffaloes, an important resource for American Indians. Nowadays we see massive numbers of American Indians dying from diabetes. Can you share with us the work you are doing with children to reconnect them with the traditional foods and why this is important also in the larger context of reclaiming indigenous cultural ways?
So I ended up going to college thanks to my older sister who's in this film. And when I got done with getting my undergraduate degree, I decided I was never going to go back to college again because I was, having kids and it was just a really hard time and it took me a long time. But then I got offered to go to get a master's degree in nutrition, and one of the professors asked me, we can help you come to school and we'll help you. What do you want? What's your interest? What do you want to learn about? And I said, well, I want to learn about my own foods and the nutritional value of my own foods. And they said, well, you would be the expert. And this was back in 2001. There wasn't any information about our traditional foods. But now there is. Now there's a lot of information. But I've always tried to do my own research and try to find information that was available, or just talking to other tribal members. But we've been so far removed from our traditional diet that many of our people have forgotten. And now our elders we've reached a point where our elders are all products of boarding school. We don't have any more elders who lived free or have the memory of living free. So the information I have to really search out. So that's always been something that I've been working on as an adult. And so I've been, every program that, or college or wherever I've been employed, I've always been able to include teaching anybody about traditional foods, our native foods. So right now I'm working with a nonprofit called Simply Smiles Incorporated, focusing on offering young people opportunities in whether it's opportunity to play at a playground or to travel to across the country to visit a university or even travel to another country. And so they hired me as the garden manager. So I grow food, but also teach community the value of the nutritional value of food. And part of that is I've incorporated our foods. So going out and harvesting, and our reservation, almost half of our population still hunt and gather. And that's huge. So there's not a lot of people growing food as there is people going out and gathering food. So that's what I'm doing now with this nonprofit is bringing this knowledge back to our young people, exposing them to our foods, cooking with them, just getting them more familiar, because it's been at least 4 or 5 generations that we've been removed from our food. And because of our special relationship with the United States government, much of the food that we have access to is through government policy. So if we don't have access to jobs, and we don't have the ability to go shopping to a good shopping center where there's good food, then we have to eat the food that the government gives us, which is not very good food. Not for us. It doesn't agree with our bodies. So all that, teaching about foods and then teaching about health, that what we eat, it really is true. What you are what you eat. That really is true. And so convincing young people that our food is important. So that's what I do back home.
Madonna Thunder Hawk, your community organizing, activism and fight for indigenous inherent rights to sovereignty and self-determination spans almost 5 decades. You've been a leader in the American Indian movement, one of the founders of Women of All Red Nations. You took part in the occupation of Alcatraz Island in '69, the protest and occupation of Wounded Knee in '73, and most recently the protest at Standing Rock. Could you share with us your thoughts on the role of women in these protest movements from a historic perspective, but also what's going on nowadays?
Okay. 5 decades. My memory's not that good. No, to start out with, you're just doing, you're not really analyzing and, really trying to, women's rights and all that kind of stuff, because we were a movement that, like it says in the film, we were a movement of families. And our traditional society, Northern Plains people of the United States, our traditional societies are all matriarchal. And because we're colonized, and, they came with, a gun in one hand and a Bible in the other, the colonizers came like that, with whiskey in their pocket, So all of those things had an effect on our people being colonized. So a lot of the family unit, the family structure was destroyed by taking the children and putting them in boarding school. My great-grandmother went to boarding school all the way up. I think I was the last generation. So I speak good English because it was forced on us, okay? So by that time, a lot of the traditional ways were lost and gone. But except for women and our role, we still are, if you will, our domain is still the camp. Okay, it never had a negative negativity put on it of women's work. Okay, it was a part of survival. So it's still that way today, you know. And when I was young, with the American Indian movement, we were a movement of families, so it was just automatic about who gets things done. And Beth Castle, the director of one of the directors of the film, but she's also wrote a book, and it has a lot of to do with the women of the Red Power movement, and it's called "The Men Were the Jawbones and the Women Are the Backbones," because that's true. In a lot of cultures, you know, people that are still land-based, indigenous. So it was almost like that's just how you get things done. So over the years, it was never individually. Yes, maybe there was an incident somewhere where some, you know, man or husband or somebody was putting down some woman or something. Individually, anything could have happened like that. But as a movement, the Red Power movement of the 60s and 70s, things were moving so fast, and things had to be done. And I guess the remnants of our culture kicked in. So we never had that. I didn't experience it. And the women in the circle that I was with, we didn't experience that. It was just automatic in Wounded Knee that whenever there was a firefight, we were the medics that went out, the women. And there was just as many women in the bunkers as there were men. So it wasn't an issue. The rest of the country, yeah, it was an issue, but shucks. That's as far as I could go on it, you know.
Could you maybe explain to the audience the matriarchal system that's part of your culture?
Real short, real quick. What I learned was our ancestors, the society, because it was all about survival. In the Northern Plains area of the United States, our people weren't planters. You know, they were hunters and gatherers. And the rolling plains, barely any trees at all. So it was wild game. And of course the buffalo herds were what sustained our ancestors. But survival of the people was important, so it was a child-centered society, which automatically made the women what we call, it's hard to translate our language into English because English is so limited. All we can say is the women were automatically sacred. But it doesn't mean sacred in the terms of English, but there's no other word for it. It was just automatic that the women were special, givers of life. The men had only two roles in life, and that was provide and protect. Period. Provide and protect. But it was all because of survival, for no other reason but survival. So the camp was the women's domain. But everything was kept in balance. For survival, you had to have harmony. within your society. So there was never any, men were not superior and neither were women. You had to keep that balance for survival. That's what I learned about how it used to be with our ancestors. So when we say matriarchal society, it's really not what it was, but again, we're dealing with English. So, limited, but try to get your point across.
Before I'm gonna give the audience a chance to ask you a couple of questions, I have two short questions. Marcella Gilbert, you also said in the film that when you were in 4th grade, you decided one day to wear your moccasins to school. What was the significance of that act?
Well, by that time, I had been, been around. My mom took us to different places, and I had experienced by then what would it be like to have our own school, or just to think outside of the structure that I was forced to be in, because that was when I was in boarding school. And so with the times that she did take us with her, that's what I learned is free thought, free thinking for myself. And then being proud to be, Lakota. And so, and I wasn't seeing that in the school. It was just a lot of, it was very oppressive, the boarding school system. So I had them, and I was very proud of them. And I thought, I'm going to wear these to school today. And so I did. And
so it kind of was also like an act of resistance.
Yeah. Okay. It made me feel good, because it was something that actually reflected who I was and who I was proud. I was proud to be Lakota. And so, and it also taught me how oppressed, as young as I was, I had a understanding of oppression because my own friends who were also Lakota were making fun of me and laughing at me. So I learned that lesson there too, of as much as you could as a 4th grader, understand what oppression was doing to us. But then, like I said, the next day, other girls wore their moccasins too, so.
Yeah. So how old were you in 4th grade?
Oh my God, how old are you in 4th grade? 8?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay. Madonna Thunder Hawk, in the film you say, and I quote, "If we can't save our children, why are we trying to save the land? That is our future." You established a grandmothers group on the Cheyenne River Reservation to assist in rebuilding kinship networks and supporting the nation in its efforts to stop the removal of children from Native families. In South Dakota, nearly 700 Native American children are removed from their homes every year, and Native American children account for 50%, I say 50%, of children in foster care, and they are being placed mostly in white families. Can you elaborate on this also in a larger context of the so-called boarding schools and the genocidal effect of this?
Okay. What happened with our people in the boarding school system is it totally destroyed the family unit. Specifically, parenting skills were non-existent. So take that one generation, the next generation. That's one of the problems we've had as colonized people. We're constantly trying to play catch up on a lot of things. And the reason I said why are we trying to save the, if we can't save the children, why are we trying to save the land, is because we are under fire on all levels constantly as a people. Because we are land-based, we have to deal with any kind of corporation. We have to deal with federal Indian policy. Every time there's a new party that takes over Congress or in the White House, there's new American Indian policy. And that's a direct hit. There's no, what do you call it? Transition time. And this has been happening to our people ever since colonization started. So when you think of it in terms of that, anyway, what started happening in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s was the state of South Dakota decided, the powers that be decided that they would funnel federal funds that usually went directly to Indian tribes for child welfare services. That would stop, and that would be channeled through the states instead of through the federal government and to the tribes. Why? Because the state of South Dakota doesn't have any large amounts of natural resources to sell, like oil or timber or you name it. But what do they have? They have a large native population. Now, when you have Republicans controlling Congress and you have a Republican state like South Dakota, then they start calling the shots. The pharmaceutical companies collaborated with especially the western states of the nation, because most of them are Republican, because they have Indian tribes and reservations in their states. Okay? So from that, they decided that, well, here's our way to make money. Follow the dollar in anything nowadays. So how do you do that with children? You start by the welfare society, okay, the welfare system. And you have the pharmaceuticals backing you politically. So let's say you get a dysfunctional family. Here's a native family, and here's a dysfunctional non-native. You take those children. The state of South Dakota would get sometimes 2 and 3 times more money, federal dollars, for a native child than they would for a non-native, because they were branded, our children are branded special needs. And most of that money channeled through the state went to the pharmaceutical companies, because they pumped in the drugs to keep these children docile, because they would all run away. As soon as they were in the system, they'd run home, try to get home. So then they'd keep them drugged up. And it was massive amount of our children were being taken like that. And what was happening in our society, the grandmothers are still very important in raising children. But in the laws of the state of South Dakota, they say grandparents have no standing here. We're concerned about the safety of the child. The mother's dysfunctional, plus she's a single parent, so we're taking these children. Go down the street to the grandmother's house where the children are in bed asleep, jerk them out of there with the police. The social worker shows up with the policeman and take those children into custody. That was happening constantly. And was still happening until in 2011, the National Public Radio did an expose on South Dakota and their welfare system. So since then, and then of course when the Republican Congress and Trump started cutting all the domestic programs and domestic funding, one of them was child welfare. So this, all of a sudden now the state of South Dakota isn't getting the money they were getting. But also the pharmaceuticals started the whole opioid epidemic in the country. And So that's been a turnaround. So the pharmaceuticals aren't getting the millions a year out of the state of South Dakota. Anyway, but the struggle is still on because we're still fighting to restore our family systems.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Let me turn to the audience. Are there any questions? We got a mic right there.
Hello, my name is George Benker. Christians know a Bible story about Samson who is too strong, so his hair was cut. I learned from soldiers in Vietnam whose hair was cut after they were selected because they were performing with their intuition very well, but they underperformed after their hair was cut during the training. Do the boarding schools still cut the hair of the children nowadays?
We don't have the boarding school system anymore. But there's still, the residuals of that era, the lack of parenting skills, things like that. But in the day, like when I was in I think even when in the 60s, when she was in school, if any of the children, male or female, ran away, that was a thing that our people always did, was they'd try to get home, run away. Then they would shave their heads completely bald because they knew that our hair was so important. And for who we were and everything, the ceremonies, everything. So they started doing that. So a lot of times our people, especially the men, just kept their hair short after that. But but nowadays you can wear your hair long if you want to, and sometimes there's bullying, sometimes but that's an individual thing, but now we're able to, because of the 60s and the Red Power movement, we can grow our hair now, and we can also have ceremonies out in the open. Don't have to be hidden.
Can you confirm the story that it's related to their intuition? That hair are...
Oh, well, I don't know if it needs to be proven, but we always knew that. That's why the men and women had long hair.
I have a question right here. Can you first mention your name and then ask the question? Yeah.
I'm already somewhere else with my mind, but I'm going back to my... My name is Mathilde, and I'm just wondering about your family system that you were speaking about in boarding school, that it was completely destroyed. That these women who were like the mothers, let's say, in a boarding school, were they like nuns only, or also women who were actually having a family by themselves, so they kind of knew what it was to have a family, or to raise kids, or to be surrounded with children? Or were they only like nuns? Being separated from family life. Being separated from a family life.
Is the question clear, or? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, the boarding school system there was two types. One was the federal boarding schools, federal government. And the other was churches, predominantly Catholic. So it depended on the politics at the time of, who had the blessing of what federal agency, to come out and divide up the population on how many were going to be Episcopalian, how many were going to be Catholic. That's what happened to me when I was in first grade in boarding school. They kept the numbers even, so there wouldn't be any, the churches wouldn't be complaining. X amount went that way, the same amount went this way. So it wasn't that... It didn't matter, because in the federal boarding schools, the matrons or the dorm attendants, whatever, they were usually hired. They were most of the time they were native. And it didn't matter if they were parents or, you know, family or single. But the Catholic schools were always nuns. But it was the policies. Because I remember being in a boarding school and there was a native dorm attendant, and she spoke only English to us. We weren't allowed to speak Lakota.
Yep. Please state your name and then the question.
Hi, my name is Peter. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Such an honor to be here with you guys. You guys are such an inspiration, so thank you. My question is how can we here in Holland best support your cause?
So the best way, I think, would be to support Nanai, because that organization has longevity. It's been here since '73. So, and there's still communication back and forth, and so I think that's the best way. And also warriorwomenfilm.com. You can find more information there about the projects that we're involved in, and some of the stuff that's coming up that we're keeping our eye on. So, but yeah, locally would be Nanai, definitely.
And I think we have some people from Nanai right here. Could you real short tell a little bit about your organization?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Susanna Nieuwland. I'm the chairman or women from the Stichting Nanai. This year we have our celebration 45 years, and that's why we brought Madonna and Marcella over to Holland to celebrate it all together. And we are an organization who helps the welfare of the native people in all kind of ways. So big project for the community, but also individually help. And we have some information here at the desk, and we are here with our two other board members. So please ask us anything, or go to our website and please donate, because then we can do more, and we can do more all together.
Okay, thank you. You had a question. Please state your name and then the question.
Hi, my name is Patricia. I'm an artist and also an activist. We saw something, a part in your beautiful documentary about the solidarity with the Black Panthers. And I'm really curious, there is an old history between the struggles of the blacks in America and Native Americans. And I'm curious how it is now. Is there still solidarity going on, for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement? And is the solidarity reciprocal?
You know, with social media, it's made it a lot easier nowadays than it was when I was young. I mean, we had a mimeograph machine. You know what that is? On, you know, landlines, and I think one newspaper, The Guardian, and that was it. You know, but nowadays it's this instant communication, and social media makes it a lot easier. And many people, many movements around, not only the United States but globally, we're finding out we're fighting the same battle. Clean water, clean air. I mean, come on, you know. We have to. It's real basic, this struggle. And in the United States, with what's happening now politically, is they're getting rid of all the safeguards my generation fought for. To have, like I said, clean air, clean water, but protecting the earth. Corporations, if they made a mess, they'd have to clean it up. Well, it's not that way anymore. You know, so there are those kinds of issues that are help us collaborate more and work together. For example, at the camp at Standing Rock, we had representatives of every organized Mother Earth protection organization going. But also we had anybody that was in any kind of resistance. They came, they brought representatives, they stayed as long as they could, and they helped out before they left. We always had, but this younger generation is so cool because they're not afraid to move. They're not afraid to do things, At least the ones we're involved with, And there was hundreds and thousands that came that were in and out of that camp from all over the place. So yeah, I think there's a lot of hope for Black Lives Matter. Always support whatever we're doing when we're working on divestment and those types of issues with the extraction energy corporations. We get a lot of help in the urban areas from the different organizations.
I'm going to take one more question before we wrap up with Karin Lashmizing. She's going to do some beautiful poems for us.
Hello, my name is Kaveh Vares. I'm from Iran. I was wondering about the matter of language, because language is, to me, one of the greatest sources of a culture. And in a way, we think that we have control over our language, but it's language which has more control over us because we just use it during our lifetime, while the language is growing much older than us for thousands of years. And in the school, what I saw in the film, you were talking to the kids in English, and I don't know how much of the language that your native, how much of the native language is still there, and is it preserved, or is there any movement that is trying to grow that and preserve it?
Absolutely. In the part where we're all standing by the river and that little boy can smell a snake fart. That woman who's in that film, she's part of a language revitalization project on Standing Rock. And they're very successful. In fact, the young people that they work with are from, I think they start at 4 years old, and they teach them through first and second grade, and now they're looking at third and fourth. And what's happening is the young people are going home and speaking more Lakota than their parents. So now the parents have to go with them to learn. And so it's very successful, and we're starting to see more ways. Like on my phone, I have an app. It's called the New Lakota Dictionary. So I could just type a word in there, and it'll come up in the Lakota language, and you can also listen to the way it's pronounced. So there's more and more ways for us to access our language. We still need more of these kinds of revitalization projects all over, because our elders, like I said, our elders now are products of boarding school. And so it's very traumatic for them to even try to teach someone else. Many of them have not passed it on. And those of us who want to learn it, they're like, why aren't you doing this? But we also understand why, because it was such a traumatic experience for them in boarding school to speak their language. So now there's fear, there's a lot of internalized depression going on. So, but yeah, we're looking at, ways to bring it back. So every year there's a annual language summit where you can go to Standing Rock and spend 3 weeks there, and all you do is learn and speak. Learn and speak and learn and speak. So it's making a comeback. It's looking really good.
Karin? Could you come and join me at the stage?
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm going to stand out here. It's a great honor for me to perform my poetry for an audience, of course, but especially for you, because I've worked with indigenous people in Suriname, in empowerment and with a lot of development work, and this is a reflection. I'm not going to say anything, but I think you can see how related it is, and this is it's Dutch, but I've translated it. Feeling. I asked him why he brought me shoes, which would mean I would not be able to feel the ground anymore. He told me that's how it ought to be, and it would protect me. I asked him how I would be able to protect myself if I was no longer able to feel. He gave me papers with dancing numbers in between loops and curves. I asked him, where are my animals? Where the sun? Where the moon? Where my hunting ground? He just looked at me with amazement. My hand raised itself towards the drifting sky. He carried a roof that protected his view. I asked him to feel the earth, but his feet were cooped up in sturdy black leather with shoelaces, and it kept him from the source of life. The loss of. And so much you will give, our air, in payment converted, and so much I will receive, drought in words rewritten, and so much will enrich me, hydropower, the benefit of my loss when you forgot to love what's best for us. The last one, it's called The Children of the River. And I saw that piece in a documentary. There's a word in it, it's a word, sula. It's a Surinamese word, and it means a rapid. And it's a very strong wave. And it's called Children of the River. Don't be fooled by an accent, because the house of the heart, which you think you own, expresses its own words. Don't be fooled by an accent. Transform the thoughts which lead you to believe they are mine. Don't be fooled by an accent, because I'm a child of the river in which the breath of my ancestors flow. Do not confine me in accents. Hear me speak with the voice of the Sula, fighting for the river from which you came into being.
This ends our program. Once again, it was a great honor. Thank you for taking the time being with us. And I want to ask the audience one more warm applause for our guests. Thank you.